and she's going to record the webinar. Thank you. And this is a panel from surviving to thriving. So we're really going to focus tonight on the place that wellness has in success, and specifically for our women identified folks who are in the STEM fields, and then specifically that came from Tandon. So they know what you're going through. They were in your shoes and now are kind of out in the field. And so we'll be asking them some specific questions about how wellness, both emotional, mental, physical, has played into their success in their fields and also as students. But we'll also leave it open for you all to ask any questions. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little raise hand feature or a Q&A. You can use either of those once we open it up for questions, and just let us know if you do have something to ask. If you put it in the Q&A, we can then open it up for so that everyone can see in case others have the same question. And then we'll either try to answer it on the back end, or if we have some time, we'll have our panelists ask it as well. And if you need anything, feel free to put it in the Q&A as well, like tech-wise, and just so you know, this is being recorded. So yeah, if you have to leave early or anything, we will send it out to all participants so that you can see it and have it for future reference. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight. This is Delia Salem. Her title, she works in the counseling and wellness services here at NYU, and she's a Tandon clinical social worker. So she's here, she works with our students, obviously off campus right now, but she works with all of you and is very familiar with the students and the Brooklyn campus and all of the kind of things that come along with that as far as wellness for STEM focused students. So I will let her get started and introduce our panelists. And thank you again, all of you, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you all for having me here today. I'm really excited about the conversation that we're about to have, and certainly my participation in this. As Sarah was mentioning, we're here to discuss what the intersection between wellness and success, and oftentimes how the wellness component can sometimes be compromised in the ambition to reach whatever success may look like for any given individual, and especially as it relates to women identifying persons pursuing careers in STEM. And we do have three wonderful panelists today that have volunteered their time outside of their work hours, which I'm sure are very demanding, to speak to their own personal experiences as professionals, as well as their, experiences as students, having gone through this process like many of you are doing now. So at this point in time, I would like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, if they can share their names, perhaps the year that they graduated from NYU Tandon, their current position or field. And if you can also share with us a favorite memory from your time at Tandon and your interest in participating in this panel. Any one of you are welcome to jump in or raise your hand, and I'm happy to call you out. I know it's a little different when we're doing this virtually.
I can go first. So I am Asha Williams. I graduated from NYU in 2015. I did my bachelor's in chemical and biomolecular engineering there. One of my favorite memories is of being an RA, a resident assistant at the dorms, and just planning activities for my residents and decorating bulletin boards. It was very stressful at the time, but when I look back, I think that was something I really enjoyed doing. Currently, I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Cornell University, and I do research in vaccine development.
Thank you, Asha.
All right, I can go next. Hi, I'm Hannah Catbogen. I graduated in 2014. Currently, I work for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey as a construction engineer. Right now, I'm on the Newark Airport redevelopment program. We're building a new terminal, Terminal 1, so that'll be open late next year. Yeah, one of my favorite memories, I was actually tagged in a video back in December from 2010, which was a while ago. And it was actually the commissioning video for our Intro to Engineering and Design. And in that, it was our team video where we completed our robot picking up the ping pong balls and putting them in baskets. And I just remembered how exciting that was kind of like my breakout into the engineering world. And I remember being excited about, just learning all the ins and outs of engineering and what it meant and what it could do. And I remember that just being a really fun time for me.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, Christine here. I am a senior consultant in Deloitte's real estate location strategy practice. I graduated from NYU in 2014, which seems like so long ago. My background is in construction, and so I currently lead my clients through workplace transformations and operations improvement, enterprise performance efforts and contracts. I'm really passionate about helping women and young girls. And I was really excited to join the panel, for that reason, anything to sort of further the cause. My best memory at Tandon, was, of course, those Othmer days. Fun fact, Hannah was my very first roommate, 3rd floor of Othmer. And also just, serving on NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers. I'm still so close with so many of the folks that I worked with to this day.
Thank you guys. And I loved how in each of your personal stories, you talk about how looking back, there was such excitement about what you were doing in pursuing your studies and your experiences here, and even how sometimes what were experienced as challenges are now treasured memories. So perhaps the challenge of living with a new roommate that you've never met before, or the challenge of being an RA, or being in this competition, and how oftentimes these exciting experiences and these stressful experiences can also be a source of sense of achievement and joy. So definitely bringing that full circle for us as we're talking about how many of our students today are certainly experiencing stress, but also looking back or what can be some cherished memories. Tune in 10 years when they're talking about this on their panel. So, all of you kind of mentioned how looking back, it seems so long ago that you were at school. I mean, I think this past year has certainly seemed a vortex for time in itself. So, we were curious, as, we're acknowledging the stress of this past year, if you can speak a little bit to how your life, either, both personally and professionally, have been impacted by the changes of the last year.
Yeah, I can share. I know for me, I am so energized by my interactions with my colleagues, being able to take a break during the workday to grab coffee, or just stop by somebody's, cube to chat, traveling to visit family. And that's been the hardest thing for me over the last year, just having restrictions around that. And so it just required me to be a lot more intentional about reaching out, using technology as best I can to connect with others. I know, as someone who previously commuted, I'm now 100% remote. And so I invested in an Apple Watch, so it keeps me honest on how many calories I'm burning throughout the day, and is all in my business when it reminds me that I need to get my act together.
So I never went remote at all. So I'm still at the office in the field every day. And I think one of the challenges there is changing everything about the way I do my job. Being in the construction field, being on site, being close to people. And now you're in this world where you have to wear a mask and you have to watch how close you're next to people, and you can't, if you want to look at something, you got to wait until the guy's done doing whatever he's doing. Just everything. Meetings are all virtual now. It's like, just to piggyback off of what Christine said about interpersonal relationships in the workplace. I mean, that is a big part of not only, by breaking up my workday, but also just in general of how we do work. And I think that it was a very stressful time professionally to try and change the way we do business. And also personally, I mean, I, I had 3 major losses in my family within 6 months. And the fact that you can't do, services the way you want to, you can't see family the way you want to. My family lives all over the place. So it's impossible to get everybody together. And it's just, this year was really hard. It's a really difficult year to navigate all these big changes. And I definitely say that it was a challenging way to adapt to a new world.
Yeah.
For me, so I started my current position early last year, about a month before everything was shut down. So I'm kind of in a place where I don't really know a lot of people. It's a new town. And then because of the lockdown, I've had basically zero social life. So that's definitely a huge challenge because I also can't travel freely because of restrictions at work. And then I'm fortunate to still have a job during the pandemic. I know a lot of people lost their jobs, but we now work on a shift schedule. So it's kind of trying to coordinate my experiments around a shift schedule instead of having, 24 hours to figure things out in the lab. That has been challenging as well. But yeah, and also the type of research I do, I work in vaccine development. And I'm also doing outreach work around vaccines with the United Nations. And that has been a lot. It's a labor of love, honestly, but it is very challenging at times dealing with anti-vax people and just, people who don't understand certain concepts. So yeah, that's been my year.
Yeah. And I think we all, as you each pointed out, so much of the work, whatever role that you take on, is about the relationships you make with your colleagues, the day-to-day interactions, and how perhaps in the absence of that or the changing of what those interactions look like, what gets lost. And that has certainly been echoed through many people's experiences this year. The losses or multiple losses, not just in terms of lives, but the changes in our lives and how that has impacted many individuals, relationships, and their mental health. And on that note, I'm going to skip around the questions a little bit, but I wonder if this is a good segue to talk about, wellness as it relates to like this past year and overall wellness within the field. As we all know, there is so much stigma still around mental health and accessing resources to support one's mental health and thinking about what wellness as a whole looks like. So, we wanted to kind of ask you, what are some of the misconceptions in your experience people have when they talk about the concept of wellness, and how can we combat these misconceptions and make changes that are effective for women in STEM fields?
I think when the topic of wellness comes up, people automatically think, something's wrong with you, you have a mental problem or mental issue, you're not strong enough to deal with whatever situation you're facing on your own. And I think that is a bit unfair because when someone, has a physical injury, they break their leg or they break their arm, people don't expect them to function the way they did before the injury. You don't expect someone who just broke their leg to still ride their bike to work. I think if we kind of frame it in that way, that, this person is having a difficult time because of something that you can't necessarily see, but that doesn't mean it isn't there and it isn't real. Just framing it in that way and approaching it in that way, I think would be helpful. But there definitely is a stigma around it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think, a misconception, kind of to your point, Asha, was that people think that, wellness is, like a singular state, or they think about it in terms of extremes when it's literally the day-to-day. It's a spectrum. It's, answering the question of how do I feel? How are the things that I'm doing and the people that are around me, how are they impacting my ability to, show up today? And so it thinking about your wellness could be everything from, seeing a therapist to just, carving out 15 minutes out of your day to say, I'm not having any meetings during this time. I'm going to take a walk, or I'm going to just meditate for these 15 minutes. There are little, conscious decisions that you could make every day to contribute to your wellness. And you don't wait until it's, in any of the extreme categories.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, 100% agreed. I think that a lot of people, when you hear the word wellness, you think physical. You think, okay, I have to eat healthy. I have to exercise more. I have to get out there, be physical, all of these things that attribute to your body, but nobody talks about wellness of your mind.
Mhm.
I think that a lot of people, like you said, there's a huge stigma. There's obviously, people, it's like if you want to take vitamins to, boost I take vitamin D, but why don't you take vitamins for your mind? It's like, that was one of the things that really struck me as interesting, is that there's a huge stigma about talking to someone as a therapist or taking medication or any of these things, when you would do the same thing for your body. So why wouldn't you do the same thing for your mind? It's just as important. So.
Right. You all make really good points. And I think, I hear from you the language that is even being used about wellness and the assumptions being made that it might be something that's wrong with you or have some sort of negative connotation. And I like the way you phrased it, Christine, that wellness is a spectrum, right? And you just don't arrive at this point where you're like, I'm happy forever and ever. It is this ongoing process that you have to be intentional about. And as much, and there are types of work that you can do, which is both active and passive, in order to care for your wellness needs. The mind and the body are very much interconnected, and one being compromised will affect the other. So when we're thinking about wellness, especially in the field, as women in the field, in fields that are certainly historically male-dominated, there is a curiosity, I wonder if the audience shares, about what are the different wellness strategies that have been used within these male-dominated fields that you believe can be transferable for women, or perhaps even strategies that are maybe not the same, but equitable for women?
So I would almost venture to say that rather than it being, like strategies for men as opposed to women, or comparing the two, I think that your strategies for wellness really have to be tailored to your specific lived experiences, right? Like someone who, let's say, is differently abled, someone who's a single parent, someone who might be a caretaker. I think it's important to sort of like evaluate what you specifically, may need. And as someone who might be leading a team, knowing that, wellness looks different for everybody. It's not one size fits all, and kind of taking the time to talk to everybody to sort of, analyze what you can do as a leader to help support their well-being.
I don't necessarily know if wellness strategies for men is always easily transferable. The thing that gets me is that as women in a male dominant field, there are some things that don't transfer, like becoming a mother, for example. If that's something that you choose to do, I mean, in a male dominant field, men don't get those things. They don't understand those feelings and what comes along with it. And I think that as women, there's just different ways to go about ensuring that you and your needs, and, whether it be as a wife or a mother, or like Christine said, a caretaker, any of these things that are more traditional women's roles are taken care of, as well as balancing your career in a male dominant field. I think that those are areas that are important to pay attention to, especially if you're in those types of situations. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say that men typically go through these things the same way. There are some similarities, but there are also differences in especially in being in a male dominant field, for sure.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think in the workplace, there are some behaviors that people would think are traditionally masculine traits, like, aggressiveness or trying to speak up about your points. And I think sometimes it puts women in a tricky position where you run the risk of being perceived in a certain way, etc. And if you kind of dwell too much on that, it will prevent you from doing your job effectively. So for me, I don't know if this is wellness related or not, but just for me in general, I have to always be conscious of that my default is to kind of shy away or cower down. So I have to tell myself, like, you have a point, you need to speak up in this meeting, you need to communicate directly, you need to accept credit for the work that you did. And I know that if I do those things, I feel better about myself, versus if I don't do those things, I will beat myself up later about it. And, obviously that will affect how I think and how I feel about my job. So just being aware of those little things and staying on top of them and not letting them snowball into bigger issues.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing self-advocacy, whether
Yes.
due to a gender specific need or an individual need, and giving yourself permission to take space, right? When space may not have already been allotted for you based on your gender. So I'm even thinking about sometimes, I don't know what your sites look like, Hannah, but if you're working out in the field, are there, to your point, like lactation spaces if a woman is breastfeeding? So where are these kind of spaces that does support a woman's wellness? Or, I think that was like the most poignant example that came to me in the moment, but being able to give yourself permission to advocate unapologetically for what your needs are. Yeah, thank you for those great examples. And to your point, Christine, I do believe that wellness is a very individualized process and everyone needs something different. So it's about learning what it is that you need and being able to ask for that as well, within the workplace and outside of that. In thinking about even arriving to where you're at today, part of this is about thriving and success, this conversation today. So, I came with a curiosity of what were some of the early messages each of you received about what success actually looks like. And in working with many Tandon students, there is this preoccupation with being successful. So, what were the early messages around success that you received? And were there any messages that you received about success that did not appear attainable because of your gender?
So growing up, I was raised by a single mother, raising 3 children on her own. My mom is the perfect example of never settling, never stopping until you get everything that you want. When I was starting at Tandon, she was graduating her bachelor's degree, and then she went back for her master's. And I think that early on, because we grew up not really having, living financially comfortable, I put it in my own head that success equaled money. Success equals monetary value and, being able to buy things. And because when I was younger, we didn't have things like that. I didn't have that luxury. But then as I got older, I realized that it's doing something that brings you joy, or at least, that you don't hate. I mean, your job obviously isn't going to be great every day. Your success in life isn't going to be all around one thing. It's balanced between, your job, your career, and your home life. And, all of these things, I think, as I got older, made more sense to me. I was very fortunate growing up because my mom, like I said, single, independent, did everything on her own, didn't ask for help. She was just an extremely strong person. So I personally didn't feel like everything I wanted in life wasn't attainable because of my gender. However, when I started in the field, I realized that there is, differences in pay between men and women. I mean, that still exists. There is differences in how you're treated. There is differences in, how you are given jobs and roles and responsibilities. And I think my upbringing has only influenced me to keep going and not, take it as a negative and only just try to work harder. But it definitely is difficult when you enter into a male dominant field as a woman to try and really strive to continue moving forward.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, for a lot of the reasons that Hannah just mentioned, I also equated success with money, salary, how much you're able to get. When you go without something, you sort of strive to make sure that that situation doesn't become your reality as an adult. What became complicated was when you mix that definition that was instilled of you of, climbing to the top and getting the highest salary with the other societal expectations that are put on you, where it's like, well, when are you going to get married? When are you going to start having kids? And you're like, what success is being like, these definitions are being thrown at you. So you have to, I would encourage everyone to just like stop and evaluate for yourself, like what you want success to look like. And it just it's checking off the boxes that you create, like for me now, it's making sure that I have PTO, like salary, yes, is important because it makes sure that we have a roof over our head and everything, but it's the flexibility to be able to, maybe work out in the morning before I start my work day. It's all these other things that I don't think I accounted for when I was in school. And the bottom line was getting the job that paid the most money, because when you enter the workforce, you'll find that the things that you start to value are opportunities to develop as a person, the environment, the culture that you're entering. Is it diverse? Are you respected? All of those other things, I think, can contribute to landing a successful job.
Yeah, and PTO, for folks that are unaware, is paid time off, because your time is a commodity.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's slightly different because I stayed in academia longer and I'm still in the academic world. And the definer of success is, how many publications you have in scientific journals and what impact your research work is making on the scientific community. And in order to be successful in this area, you have to put in a lot of hours or be a PI with really productive students. But at this stage in my career, it's just about putting the hours in and writing papers, applying for grants. And as Christine said, sometimes I think that I don't know if I can succeed in this field because it requires this laser focus on publishing and research, etc. And there are other things in life that I would want to pursue, like having a family, that it would be tricky to balance those things. I've spoken to people, women in this field, who are doing both, and they always stress to me how difficult it is. So that's definitely something that I'm currently grappling with, trying to figure out which path I want to take regarding that.
And thank you for sharing, each of you, kind of your own experiences and being vulnerable with our space today. Asha, you mentioned, even speaking with other women in the field, and I wonder if the rest of you have experience or even mentors in your respective fields on what advice are you receiving from other women within your respective fields on how to create a more balanced life?
Advice, it comes down to time management and also the team that you surround yourself with. Just having capable people around you, people that you can trust, people you can depend on if you need to step away or if something comes up with you in your personal life. Yeah, and also building community is very important because it's really easy sometimes to feel like you're alone, especially if within your own space you're the only woman or the only minority, etc. It's important to have community outside of that, to know that there are other people in the same position experiencing the same struggles that you're experiencing, and you guys can kind of swap coping mechanisms and strategies. And that has been very helpful for me, even in grad school.
I second that.
So actually, one of my biggest mentors, I still work with her. She's a year older than I am, so she started just 1 year before me. She's actually pregnant right now. So that was a huge deal. You know, she got married September of last year, not 2020, 2019. And then she told me she's due in July. And I think one of the biggest things that I've reflected on, looking at somebody who's just my age, just, you know, in the same exact position as I am, same field, same company, everything, is that it's really important to just speak up when you have other things going on. I think one big thing is that you're going to have other things going on in your life. That's just the nature of life, your world. You're going to have things that come up and things that happen, and you can't be afraid to ignore them or apologize for having personal things. I know Asher spoke about community. I mean, I think that being able to stand up and say, hey, I have something major going on, whether you're comfortable talking about it or not, at least expressing that. I think that that's one way that I've been taught by, you know, my mentors is important in, you know, just say what you need, say what you want, say what's important to you. And, you know, if they don't like it, then it's not a good fit for you anyway. You know what I mean? It's like, you just have to make sure that your career and your job also support you as a person outside of it.
Yeah. And you reminded me of a point that I'd like to share with everyone in the audience also, is that as an employee, depending on the structure of your company, it could be really important, or let me rephrase, it is very important to look at your policy handbook, because there are protections in place for employees who are undergoing medical or mental health challenges. You can take time off that preserves your position in your company. You can attend to your needs. You can explore accommodations in respect to any medical or mental health challenges you are experiencing. So, you know, coming back to self-advocacy and speaking up, you can share that you are struggling without needing to disclose the specifics of it, because disclosure is a very personal choice to your supervisor or to someone at HR in order to get the resources you need to succeed. And on the topic of success, again, I'm gonna derail a little bit from our questions, but we talked about the concepts of success, what messages have been received. I would be remiss not to think about how social media plays a role into the perceptions of success, especially for young women today. And, you know, I'm wondering if any of you have experiences in, you know, filtering what social media tells you, or what are the messages social media tells you about success, especially in STEM fields.
Well, for me, I know that my two triggers are seeing my friends from high school getting married and engaged and having kids. And I mean, I'm obviously happy for them, but it always makes me reflect on my life, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I just have these degrees, and then what? So yeah, that's the social media thing for me. In terms of my career, not so much. It's more about it. Social media reminds me of the things that I'm sacrificing for my career. And that definitely gets to me.
Yeah, I would just say it's so important just generally to understand what your triggers are. social media can be such a challenging thing to navigate, to not fall into the comparison trap. There was a quote that I heard where someone was like, you know, don't compare your raw footage to someone else's highlight reel. And it was like, only you know the sad moments, the messy moments of your life. And then you go on social media and everyone will only post, you know, their best life that they're having, you know, the awards that they got, you know, their life milestones. No one, or, you know, rarely do people go in and say, you know, I think I'm going to get fired. My life is really rough right now. I'm going through problems in my relationship. You know, nobody says that stuff. So it's recognizing that, hey, you know, social media for the most part will only reflect the best parts of someone's life. It's respecting the fact that everyone has their own individual journey and honoring your own. And then sort of like back to the point of, you know, triggers, it's, you know, creating the space. Like in full transparency, I've had to go through and unsubscribe or unfollow to, you know, certain pages, certain things, and I'm choosing to, you know, fill my feed with the things that encourage me and promote positivity and are things that, you know, energize me or, you know, inspire me. So taking control of that could really just contribute to your wellness in a way that will make a difference.
I mean, it's so difficult not to compare your life to other people's. When you see it all over social media, you know, I know that there are people, I work in a government agency. So obviously my salary is not what I would like it to be. However, I see people that aren't working in a STEM field, you know, didn't go to college, all these things that I did that I thought were going to be going back, you know, to success, that I thought were going to be, you know, giving me the most successful life. And they're doing whatever they're doing, but they're going on all these trips and they have all these nice things. And it's hard for me to look at it and say, man, why did I go to school? Why did I spend, you know, 4 years getting my bachelor's and then another 3 getting my master's? And why do I go to work to, you know, every day, day in, day out? You know, it's hard not to compare your life to somebody else's. But what's important to remember is that, are you fulfilled? I mean, I think my job is extremely fulfilling to me. I love what I do. I love that, you know, what I do day in, day out ends up being a building or a bridge or, you know, something that I can look at and reflect and say, oh my God, I had a big part in this. You know, that might not be everybody's definition of fulfillment. Somebody might be more fulfilled by doing something different and then being able to travel, you know, doing hard work for this amount of time and then being able to do something else. You know, it's everybody's life is different. And I don't think that social media really creates a space all the time that nurtures that idea. I think that it just shows who's gonna, you know, who can top who has the best life, who has the nicest things, and it's really hard not to compare yourself. So I think I'm gonna take a page out of Christine's book and start filling my feed with more positive things.
Yeah, and to everyone's point, comparison is often one of the thieves of joy. When we end up comparing ourselves to people, not really knowing, or comparing to people's highlight reel, as Christine pointed out. You know, I also recently read this little meme somewhere where it was basically suggesting that one doesn't compare, you know, the same, well, it's the grass is greener on the other side, but, you know, you got to water your own grass in order to make it green. So, you know, how can you practice with intention, with what you have based on your values, based on what are important to you, to water your own grass, so that you do bring that richness into your own life, the things that you want to fulfill. What do you see as some of the needed changes that must be made in the workplace to address wellness, especially as it relates to women's wellness in STEM fields? And this might have kind of been covered already, but if there's any specific thoughts you have on the matter.
I think something that's really important, I mean, it's not only applicable to the STEM field, I think it's applicable in general, is normalizing wellness as it relates to mental health. Normalizing, you know, I know that there are companies that pay, you know, or you get money off your health insurance for, you know, getting a Fitbit and doing this training and that, but, you know, it's not always as encouraged to address your mental health. I think that the more that people advocate for mental health being on par with physical health will help, you know, get that conversation going and start normalizing those needs.
Right.
Yeah, I think normalizing it is the biggest charge that people can take. Another thing that I would add on to that is just overall stop glamorizing the hustle. You know, like a lot of people are like, well, I've been working for 12 hours. Oh, I worked for 13. And, you know, sometimes in the office space, you're like, well, you're waiting for your colleague to like clock out. So you could say you've been there longer than them and not getting enough sleep. And it's not something to, you know, glamorize anymore. I think we should normalize, like, I got a good night's sleep tonight. You know, like I did not get pulled in for the weekends. I know when I was in the construction field, a lot of the terms that I would hear is, oh yeah, you know, Christine, she's one of the guys, she could, you know, get down. And it's just like, we don't have to equate working until you feel like you're going to drop down and die to being successful and to, you know, doing a good job. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, it's similar in the academic space. It's very much normalized to be overworking constantly, and your wellness is definitely put on the back burner. It's something that you have to take personal responsibility for and be very conscious of. Yeah, I don't know. Within academia, I think it's just down to the individual to monitor themselves and be self-aware, because if you keep working and working and trying to keep up, the system will push you to do more and more until you completely burn out. So yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes the system doesn't practice the empathy that we need from it.
Right.
And I hear, yeah, there is the idea of individual responsibility over one's mental health, while mental health or wellness is really a communal responsibility. You know, we often check in on one another. We check in on friends, we check in on family members, we check in on colleagues. So there is, you know, perhaps a needed shift to it being a communal support network, as Hannah also pointed out, advertising or marketing more of the resources available to their employees to support their mental and physical well-being. Absolutely. You know, someone mentioned earlier, like even accessing mental health treatment or other resources. If you're comfortable sharing, have any of you had experience accessing mental health treatment or other wellness resources? And if so, what advice would you give to others who are contemplating accessing support but are kind of unsure about whether they want to pursue it?
So for me, I do currently speak to a therapist virtually, and I kind of went about it by Googling therapy for Black girls. It's actually an organization that provides therapists of color. So that's how I found my therapist. And I would say if you're able to afford it, it's helpful to find someone who shares a similar background to you. So there are kind of things that are understood that you don't have to explain or defend yourself about if your therapist has a similar background. But as a student, that are counseling services that are available like through your student health insurance. So that's something that I also use a bit in graduate school. So that's definitely a good option for students. I know a lot of times we run into problems or issues in our personal lives and we go to our friends or other people around us, and it's good to get that support from them, but sometimes they may not be able to help us in the way that we need or in the best way. So it's also good to speak with a professional who can really give you like solid direction and help you make changes versus just having conversations about your issues.
Thank you for sharing that. I might bring you along for your endorsement in future wellness advocacy or marketing opportunities.
Yeah, this is actually something I love talking about. I'm really super passionate about advocating for mental health, and I'm an open book when it comes to it, which is probably why Christine recommended me for this. So I have actually been seeing a therapist. I went back to my old therapist. I was in therapy for 2 years. Prior to that, I saw a psychiatrist, and I was actually diagnosed with anxiety and depression, for which I am medicated for both. That's my dog. Sorry. And, you know, going back on something that I touched on a little bit earlier, you know, I was very, very nervous in the beginning about taking medication for my mental health issues. And as my psychiatrist described it to me, is you take vitamin D if you're vitamin D deficient. You take vitamins for this and for that. Why don't you think it's okay to take vitamins if you have a chemical imbalance in your brain? If you're, you know, diagnosed with something, just because we can't see it on, you know, a blood test or anything, we can't run tests on it to prove it on paper. Why is it not okay to normalize that? And that was something that really struck me. And I kept that with me for 4 or 5 years now. And it's just something that I'm so passionate about, because I feel like people are afraid sometimes to reach out for these resources for, you know, whatever reason. You don't want to be called crazy, or you don't want to, you know, come across as, you know, there's something wrong with you. And everybody experiences life differently. And whether or not you have a diagnosed mental illness or you just need somebody to talk to, I mean, I think that, you know, everybody can benefit from therapy if it's for an extended period of time or just a couple sessions. You know, you're going to your friends and your family can be helpful, but also sometimes it's just better to have that objective, you know, third party just to listen, and somebody that doesn't know every single detail about your life, you know, just hear what you have to say and understand your concerns and input advice as necessary. So, I mean, I think that anybody who thinks that they could benefit from that, I definitely would, you know, do whatever you can to find those resources for yourself.
Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, and I would also add to that too, you know, don't wait until it gets bad. And, you know, that's something that I've been guilty of. Our bodies are so remarkable in that they signal to us when something is off, something's not right. And sometimes it's so easy to, you know, quiet that voice and say, oh, I'm too busy. Or when the feeling passes, you're like, oh, well, I'm better now. But, you know, when you're feeling that, you know, that thing, and, you know, it feels different and it looks different for everybody, you know, that's the time to do it. Right in that moment, to identify it and, you know, speak to someone. You have nothing to lose, you know, by practice. They, you know, medical professionals are sworn to, you know, confidentiality in a lot of ways. There's so many resources there. Don't prioritize, oh, I have to go to this meeting or I have to do something else, because, you know, if it gets too bad, then all those things don't even matter anymore. So definitely taking the time as you recognize that off feeling to do what you need to get better, do what you need to do for yourself.
Yeah. Thank you guys for sharing your personal stories and being vulnerable with us once again. It can be a really hard decision to first recognize the need for help and to then go through the motions of accessing it. And there can be so many hurdles to that. So I'm just going to make a little quick plug here, like that if you are interested in, you know, knowing your options, speaking with a counselor, we start with conversations. And as Christine pointed out, we are confidential. We're like the Las Vegas, what happens here stays here. Your privacy is protected by federal law. So, you know, if you haven't tried it, or if you have, what have you got to lose to talk with someone, to know what your options are, get some advice, and make an informed decision about what you want to do to take charge of your wellness. With that being said, are there any, you know, kind of in the last few minutes we have together, what do you wish you knew about mental health when you were students? And what advice can you offer to students currently watching this and watching this later that are attending NYU?
I mean, I think I wish that I knew how important mental health is. I think I wish that I understood. I mean, in the last few years, I think that we're getting to a place where mental health is becoming more and more normalized as we talk about it. But as a student in 2010, 2014 at NYU, it wasn't a conversation that a lot of people were having at the time. And I think that I wish I understood that mental health is a thing. You know, it's not something to just ignore. You know, you get stressed out being in school, you get stressed out being a student. I mean, finals, midterms, exams, studying, all of these things. If I knew that taking the time for 10 minutes just to do some breathing exercises or meditate would help me so much, I would have done it then. You know, and you're going from, you know, a lot of people move to go to school at NYU. You're moving to New York. If you're living there, it's a big change. There are a lot of big changes happening, and especially, you know, and then towards the end, you're going out to go and get a job. I mean, there's a lot of big changes that happen as, you know, an undergrad, and then even as a graduate student, there's things that you need to address. And I wish that I understood that back then. I wish that I understood that it's okay to need help and just to take a minute and do something for yourself, to take a break from studying, take a break from anything. You know, I wish that I understood that those things were important.
Yeah, so for me, I echo what Hannah said. I think at times as an undergrad, I just felt like really overwhelmed and stressed out and, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. But then I would think, well, everyone else is probably feeling the same way, and look at how they're thriving and doing well. So I shouldn't complain, or I shouldn't say anything about this. I just need to suck it up and keep working. And that's definitely how I dealt with a lot of my stress in undergrad and a bit of grad school, until I decided to start talking to a therapist. And then I found other ways of dealing with my stress, like just physical activities and other things that I could do. But I think as an undergrad, I wish I was more aware of those resources, and those conversations were happening more often, so that I could realize that I wasn't alone, and, you know, nothing was wrong with me per se. And it would have helped to make my journey a little bit smoother. So yeah, I would say for current undergrads, when you get to those tough moments, whether it's regarding your academics or personal life, don't be afraid to find those resources that do exist, because they are out there. It's just not something that, you know, you see on social media every day, and so you're consciously aware of it all the time. You have to really seek those things out, and they are definitely helpful. They can make a big change in your academic journey.
And we did have some questions in our chat that I want to be mindful of getting to. I don't know, Christine, if you wanted to add to that last question.
Sure. No, I agree with everything Hannah and Asha shared. You know, the more you know, I'm happy that it's now starting to be a part of the conversation. I'm happy that companies are making it a part of their, you know, their proposition when they hire you, you know, the methods that they're taking to support you in that way. I saw one of the questions in the Q&A, so I could take one of those. The first one I see was, how do you navigate imposter syndrome at work? This ties in so much to what Asha was saying in terms of like, you feel better when you're able to fully lean into your role and advocate for yourself and speak up when you want to. Imposter syndrome was something that I absolutely suffered with during my career. And at times, honestly, I still do. And I know some of the advice that I had gotten in the past was you're there for a reason. Know that you bring something to the table. But if I could offer something more concretely that I actually did was I wrote a list of my strengths and I wrote a list of my weaknesses. And those tools allowed me to show up better and stronger to the meetings that I attended. You know, I was able to make an impact in this way in a few weeks ago. I was able to deliver this, under budget and within time that, and you coach yourself by reminding yourself the things that you have accomplished while managing your shortcomings or, what that skill gap may be. So although, I might struggle with, let's say, data analytics, I'm also measuring what I'm doing to strengthen that part. And so coaching yourself and being aware could help with that one. I just wanted to share that piece on the imposter syndrome.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And it's a really good point because women especially, and in any group, if you're entering into a new field, if you are feeling like you are a minority group into an area that you're entering to, many people experience imposter syndrome. I believe it's something like 70% of the population at any given time is struggling with this. So it's more of a normal issue than it is a phenomenon these days to question one's ability. And as Christine was saying, you've made it this far, you've gotten yourself here. You weren't just lucky, you've worked hard. So recognizing and celebrating your achievements and owning that you are the one that got yourself to this place and you will be the one to keep yourself going. We had one more question that I want to, did we answer it? Or maybe not, okay. Well, I guess those are all the questions we have for today. Do we have any questions from the audience that we can take before we wrap up for the evening?
Hello. Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us. And I know we're getting on to 7 o'clock, so we'll kind of wrap up. Thank you to Delia for moderating. That was wonderful. I learned a ton. You ladies are fantastic, and I want to be best friends with all of you. So thank you so much for joining. I have some group texts with students and my colleagues, and also in the chat, everyone is saying how candid that you were and vulnerable, and how we don't have these conversations a lot at Tandon, but in STEM, in the university. So thank you so much for being so willing to talk about this topic and to share resources and some tips about navigating this, because our students are kind of going through the same thing. So very much appreciate you joining us. If you do have any questions, like I said, this will be recorded, and then you can always reach out to our office, eng.studentaffairs@nyu.edu, and we'd be happy to connect you if you all would be willing to connect with some of our attendees, and feel free to put any questions in the chat, and I'll kind of be here for a couple minutes. But thank you again, and everyone have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Guys.